The Torah teaches us to be careful with collective guilt. Let's go back to the book of Genesis, to a not-so-happy episode where Dinah, the daughter of Jacob and Leah, is raped by Shechem, the prince of Hamor. The question now is, how is this little clan, this family, going to respond to this violence? The prince, the rapist, needs to be brought to justice. We learn a lot from actually Jacob's inaction, often his quietness. The Torah tells us that he waits for his sons to come back and to be collected and a little more calm before telling them about their sister's violent rape. Jacob seems to know that they are going to react with anger and vengeance. And he wants to see if he can quell their anger just a little bit. But we know that Shimon and Levi, Leah's two full brothers from the same mother, seek vengeance against the city. They create this ruse where they all circumcise themselves, and while they're sitting in their pain, they wipe out the entire city. Jacob is extremely angry at Shimon and Levi, so much so that he even reminds them about their violence on his deathbed. But Jacob is also passive afterwards. He knows in the realpolitik his reputation has been marred, but he also knows that he needs to end the cycle of violence then and there. We learn from this episode that we need a lot of nuance and carefulness when dealing with our passions and feelings when it comes to adversaries, because it is very easy to impose collective punishment. Israel's battles right now seem forever at the moment, and somewhat like Jacob, we American Jews are on the sidelines a little bit, but very much quite affected with what goes on. I wanted to talk more theoretically about what does it mean to be American Jews supporting Israel and loving America, but I feel compelled to address the news of the hour, which is namely Zoran Mamdani's anti-Israel video. Lots and lots has been written and said in response to it. And so I'm going to reflect the words of three people, but there's plenty more out there. The words of Rabbi Jay Michelson, who I've known actually as a child since Camp Ramah, and then the columnists Bret Stephens and Tom Friedman from the New York Times. Michelson describes the harm that Mamdani's words has caused. He's now the mayor of 960,000 Jews in the city, and then obviously people like us are right on the border. He's no longer spewing hate that he learned from his dad in a Brooklyn basement. His audience is bigger, and the nuance that he says, I support Jewish New Yorkers, and I'm just criticizing Bibi Netanyahu and the nation state, does not fly. We all know that in this world, Israel is a different nation state. It is a state for the Jews of the world and for its citizens. And it's too easy, based on Mamdani's words, for naive bigots to connect the dots, at least in their mind, and to blame all of the Jews for Bibi's supposed crimes. And these bigots then engage in collective guilt. What happened that next day, basically, on Tisha B'Av afternoon, the stabbing of a gentleman shows that. And speaking of guilt, by the way, in the video itself, Mamdani played judge and jury. Yes, Bibi has an indictment from the ICC. Let's put the merits of that aside for just a moment. No trial has been conducted. But yet Mamdani claims it's plain to the eyes and the heart that Bibi is guilty. His exact words. I didn't go to law school, but I know that that would be cause an attorney, a defense attorney, to object on many counts. You can't just say it's clear to the eyes and heart that someone is guilty and be declared guilty. That's not justice. And of course, the merits of the indictment itself are suspect. Let's note that this so-called genocide ended the minute all of the hostages were released and the bodies are recovered. If you want to commit a genocide, you continue to do it until the job is done. Mamdani chose to run for mayor, and yes, he was duly elected to his office, but he needs to know that his words carry weight and contribute to an environment of bad actors. And I am heartened to see that the entire mainstream Jewish community, from right to left, has collectively told Mamdani, and excuse the words, to shut up. And speaking of shutting up, though, we do have to look inward to our side. And both this week, Friedman and Stevens, both very pro-Israel columnists, have said that Israel needs to look inward at what's going on in the violence of the West Bank. And they are pointing to other leaders, namely Itamar Ben-Gavir and Bezrik Smotrich, whose words are also inciting violence and causing collective guilt of all the Palestinian Arabs. Yes, there are terrorists in the midst, in Gaza and in the West Bank. But it is the role of the IDF to go and investigate and use their great intelligence to weed out and to stop and quash the terrorism at its root. It is not the goal of 19 and 18-year-olds, not yet in the army, or might not, some people have finished the army, to go and run on a Friday night. They do it dafka on Shabbat, and go and marauder and burn down Palestinian towns just to level them down. Stevens comments how this is really putting a bad light to Israel. It makes it harder for us Jewish Americans to make the positive case for Israel. Then we get to Tom Friedman. And yes, I know he is dreaming. He always likes to dream. He compares the extreme visions of both sides and tells the world, there are 7 million Arabs and 7 million Jews between the river and the sea, and no one is going anywhere. So if we don't find a solution, we are promoting a forever war. So what is his dream? His dream would that Mamdani, as a better leader, would use his charisma to bring the Jews and the Arabs and the world together to actually forge the two-state solution. We know that it's not nearby, but we know that it's the only solution if they're not going to go anywhere. We obviously have to see how the Israeli elections go in October, how some of the elections here go in November. And we know that we American Zionists are going to contend with the rising tide of anti-Israel sentiment. So what can we do? I'm heartened by other writings that remind us that there is a silent moral majority on all sides of all the world. That when you say, if collective killing of civilians, is that good? Almost everyone says, no, that is not good. Rooting out terrorism? Yes. And so we have to convince the world, the peace-loving people, that Israel belongs on the right stage, and that if we use the right language, and yes, elect the right people, use the right words, then we can find a way out of this forever war. One thing that October 7th taught us, at least taught me, is that the Jewish people of the world must be united. We have an important role to play in keeping and strengthening the Jewish state of Israel. So as I conclude my sermon series about what does it mean to be a Jew living in America in 2026 with 250 years of our history, we have to know that we non-Israeli American Jews have to use our words to make the case for Israel. And when we do that, we can hopefully bring an end to the senseless violence. This week's Parsha gives us some of the answer, some of that language. Israel has been our promised land for 3,000 years. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. And the Jews are a peace-loving people. And we have shown with ingenuity we can make this little land support 14 million people. We have the resources to allow the Jews and the Palestinians to live together and thrive in peace. So let's do what we can to drown out the extremists on both of our camps, and let the silent, but soon to not be silent, peace-seeking majority lead the way. Shabbat Shalom.